everyone, welcome back to Staying Connected, a podcast where I talk to other people about their stories with Vascular Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, or VEDS, which I also have. This is Katie, your host, and before I introduce our very special guest today, I want to let you know that this podcast is going to be taking a summer break and will resume in the fall. If you would like to share your story on this podcast, please reach out to me. You can go to translucent1.blog. There is a contact page there, and I will put a link to that in the description of this episode. Thank you so much for all your support for this podcast and in general for just being an amazing community for the last 3 years that I have been doing this podcast. And now I am very excited to introduce to you someone who is very special to me, and I think many people in this community feel the same. I kind of think of her as the mother of our community, and Cathy, I am just so excited that you are coming onto the show and sharing your experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie, for having me here. It's not only my story. I think it's the Bowen family story, because each one of us was severely impacted by what happened and by Dave's death. Our daughter, Melissa, was only 10 and a half at the time. So her whole life, she always had her older brother in her life. But now her life was completely shattered. And she not only lost her only sibling, but she also lost a huge part of her parents. And it was the toughest struggle for all of us to stick together and not fall apart or let what happened to Dave destroy us. I knew that I needed to find a way to hold us together because I really was an empty shell. The deepest part of me died with Dave. If I didn't find something to fill that emptiness, we probably wouldn't have survived. But Dave was the only one who had vascular EDS. But for my husband, daughter, and I, it's more that we have it in our heart and soul. So it affects everyone in the family when you lose someone so special.
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful for you sharing this story with us. And I know that, I've heard so much about Dave, and I'm really excited to have you share that with everybody too. So tell me more about David. Who was he? You want to share his full name or?
Yes, he was born David Daniel Bowen III, and he was the greatest gift. He was a bright light whose flame was snuffed out way too soon. He was born 3.5 weeks early after my membranes ruptured prematurely. He weighed 4 pounds, 5 ounces, 17.5 inches long. He came out super alert with his eyes wide open. Considering his size, he did very well and didn't need much assistance. I also discovered that there was a ABO incompatibility between him and I. When the mom's blood type is type O and the baby is type A, the mom's antibodies, her immune system attacks the baby's blood. If it could have been extremely serious where he would have needed a blood transfusion, but thankfully he didn't need that. His head did measure a little large, like 39 weeks. So they termed him small for gestational age, but no one ever followed up or told us to have it checked out. But Dave loved life and he lived it to the fullest. His passion was magic, science, playing hockey, and most of all, drawing. He was an exceptional artist. He loved his family, and he had a great sense of humor. He loved to laugh. He was gentle, kind-hearted young man on the verge of adulthood with so many new discoveries waiting, and sadly, he never got the chance to experience that. High school, prom, dating, serious girlfriend, independence, driving a car, college, and so many more.
Yeah. How old was he, and what happened to him?
He was 14 when all of a sudden he developed pain in his abdomen. And he said it felt like he had to go to the bathroom, but it wouldn't come out. So we took him to the emergency room and they diagnosed him with a bowel perforation. He was 13 and a half at the time. So they had to do emergency surgery and they wound up giving him a colostomy, which was, devastating for him and for all of us. But he did survive the initial perforation. It was a long struggle to get him back to, the way he was before.
Yeah.
But when he came home after having that, it was his 14th birthday, and he was home recovering, and we had bought him new rollerblades. And all he wanted was to put the rollerblades on and skate around the driveway. So his father and I, held each arm, and he skated around the driveway because he was a hockey player. He was a roller skater, ice hockey player. That's what he wanted to be. So, he took a lot, and he wanted to recover. And it wasn't until we were faced with trying to figure out why he had bowel perforation. And I took him to a teaching hospital to try and figure out why that occurred.
Mm-hmm.
But no one could, figure out why he had a bowel perforation at 13 and a half years old.
So then how did that progress? Did they try to do a reversal of the colostomy?
Well, that was the plan, was to give it 2 months. And after I took him to the children's hospital and they determined that there was no other cause, they didn't see anything that, would have caused a bowel perforation, then he was scheduled to have the reversal. And it occurred really, he was scheduled the day after he graduates from 8th grade. So he was on homebound, but he wanted to be part of his graduation. So he wanted to go back to school so he could be a part of everything and his friends. And it was tough to go back 8th grade. You're 14 years old and you have colostomy.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was determined that he was, going to push through, and, he was looking forward to having the colostomy reversed so he could start high school and, live his life.
So what happened?
So he graduated. The next day we went in to have the reversal, and there was a lot of adhesions, a lot of scar tissue, and it wasn't a simple reversal. And had they known about vascular EDS, they would have never tried to reverse it at that time, especially not having a diagnosis where we had the knowledge, to have a skilled surgeon who knew about connective tissue disorders to do the procedure.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't afforded that opportunity. And that's, I think, the most horrific thing is knowing that we didn't have a correct diagnosis for him, that they blindly went in and cut away at adhesions and cut the bowel in half to repair it, but it never healed. So it started to leak inside of him the next day. And he was in that hospital for 2 weeks, and he progressively got worse and worse, to where I had to transfer him out of that hospital into another hospital, try and save his life. And by the time I got him to the teaching hospital, he had sepsis, internal bleeding, a large liver hematoma, 4 small bowel perforations, abscesses, and blood clots after 2 weeks being in the hospital. So he was in that hospital for 10 days. And the next day, they had to do emergency surgery to try and fix all the damage. And from his tissue being so fragile and like wet paper, they finally called in a geneticist to look at him. And all it took was for her to come in, look at his history, and look at him. And she was able to give him a diagnosis, but that came 3 days before he passed away. So by that time, it was too late to save his life.
That sounds incredibly devastating.
It was.
Yeah. So, did he have any signs that he had VEDS other than what he had been through?
He did. He had almost all of them. He had the premature birth. He had translucent skin with visible veins, bruising. He had a tendon rupture. He was small built, small mouth. He had bilateral hernias. He had a hyperspadias. He had surgery when he was 3 months old to repair that. He healed, but he bruised severely. And he slept with his eyes partially open. And the number one was the bowel perforation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was missed. So I couldn't fathom that the medical field wouldn't know something so devastating that, they'd never seen before. So the one surgeon could only conceive that someone did something to him. And, so we went through an investigation for child abuse also, which was another devastating thing to have to deal with.
Yeah. Was that prior to his death, like before they tried to reverse the colostomy?
Yes,
Okay.
that was before we were trying to figure out why he had the bowel perforation. So I knew in my gut that something caused it, and something was wrong. And, I tried to find the answer by, going to different doctors, and none of them gave me the answer that would have saved his life. That was what caused my mama bear to be, 1,000, 1,000 degrees. My anger was like through the wall. I couldn't, especially him being premature and me worrying about him when he was little. I always took care of him, took him to the doctors. Anything that was wrong with him, I was right on top of it. So for him to have a genetic disorder that went undiagnosed for 14 years, it blew my mind. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even handle that. And it was like, they dropped him, through the crack.
Yeah, and to be accused of child abuse as well, that is really, terrible.
That's the topper right there. It's like, okay, if we can't explain it, then we'll just go with the thing that's the most obvious, that, we think that it is, and not, look any further. And that's what, caused me to do my own research. And when I started researching everything, because I needed to know everything about it, mm-hmm. what it was, what happened. And it was easy for me to find in the medical literature 15, 16-year-olds who had bowel perforations that had vascular EDS. And it was the year or two before my son had his. So it would have been easy to find that answer, but no one was willing to look further or take that other step to look further.
Yeah, and how did you find this? I mean, it was 1996.
1990. Yeah, I had just gotten a computer and went online, and I spent hours upon hours researching everything I could find. I went to the library, printed out articles. I had them finding medical journal articles for me.
Mm-hmm.
I educated myself so that I knew what I was talking about, what I was dealing with, because the hospital made it sound, they said to me that he was the second one that they ever heard of or ever knew of. So I was thinking in the world, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's the second one that they know of in the world.
Yeah.
But little did I know how common it really is.
Yeah.
And
And there's so many people who are undiagnosed still
yes,
out there.
yeah,
You know, you talked about your mama bear came out
yeah,
and you really wanted to understand, and I think that's how you started advocating as well, even though he had passed. So I really think that you've made a huge impact from that years of doing that and getting this community together, truly.
well, yeah, and I tried to, I tried to prevent another Dave. I knew there were many Daves out there who weren't diagnosed and their families out there. And I was going to try my best to prevent another death that was needless. If he would have, if I would have had that diagnosis, that correct diagnosis, I would have been able to seek out better physicians, better surgeons. I'd be more aware of situations. I would have never put him back to have it reversed.
Right.
So things would have been different. And, he could have still been alive and lived with that colostomy. So he didn't need to die. And that's what I was trying to prevent. I needed an avenue, and I made him a promise. I promised him that I would make sure that the doctors that took care of him would know everything about vascular EDS, that I would make sure that no one else would go through this,
Yeah.
and that I would dedicate my life to make that happen. And that's what I've tried to do.
I say that you've done a really great job of doing that, for sure.
That,
You're welcome. Did he know right before? I mean, that he got the diagnosis 3 days before he passed away?
no, they brought us into a conference room and they told us that they were pretty sure that he had this, but it would take a skin biopsy, and that if he made it out, he'd be very limited, and that he wouldn't be able to do some of the things that he loved to do. And my son's dream was to be a hockey player, an ice hockey player.
Oof.
And I said right there, no one is telling my son about this vascular EDS, because no one is taking his dream away from him. So he never knew about vascular EDS. And I sucked up my anguish, and I made sure that my face didn't show it. And when I went in, he wasn't going to know that he had this. He had enough to deal with, enough to fight for his life. He wasn't going to be crushed by this diagnosis and to take all his hopes and dreams away from him. That was not going to happen on my watch. So
Wow.
it didn't.
Wow. So
Yeah.
how did you cope with that as a mom? Like I am not a mom. I've heard that the anguish and despair that comes from losing a child is one of, if not the worst feeling.
It
How
is.
did you cope with that?
Yeah. I was an empty shell, and it was like part of me, the biggest part of me died with him. And, to fill it, um, I knew that I had to, because your love and memories never die. So, I had to give that love that I had for my son. I had to give it to someone else. And who better than those that had the same vascular EDS that he had?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my saving grace. One of my saving graces was my daughter saved my life, and the work that I did for Vascular EDS, because everyone that I met, I saw essence of my son. So it was, like giving and still loving my son through the VEDS community, and the people that I met have been truly a blessing to me in my life. Even though, it's been hard to lose so many people, I've grieved many, many people that touched my heart, but I am so much better for knowing them.
That's incredibly sweet, and I know that we are very grateful and blessed to have you as well.
Thank you. I'm blessed to have you too, girl.
I love you bunches. Um,
Yeah.
so you said that you were like an empty shell and that it really you took all of that love that you had for Dave and put it towards this community and other people with the same thing.
Right.
About how long did it take you to start feeling like yourself again? Did you ever start feeling like yourself?
I think, you know, I I made contact with the National Foundation, which was the society now, and I started a Southern New Jersey branch um, of, to bring awareness education. So I was so concentrated on finding those that had EDS, all types. I helped all types of EDS, getting them diagnosed. I go to different events and set up a table, give out pamphlets, educate the community. But the main thing that really was one of those shocking moments was when I received a phone call a year after Dave died. And it was from another mom who also lost her 14-year-old son in the same exact hospital as Dave. And he had vascular EDS. And his name was Jordan David Specht.
Wow.
And so initially he was misdiagnosed as classical EDS, and then eventually he was diagnosed correctly. But it was her and I, the instant bond that we formed that day, from our exact experience to go from Dave being the second one that they ever knew of, and here a year later, another boy with vascular EDS loses his life in the same exact hospital. So that started the Moms on a Mission, and her and I went to every single EDS conference. Her and her family started a goth outing, which we helped to raise funds to support EDS and awareness. And so there were a lot of moms along the way, a lot of, Moms on a Mission, Linda Lentz, her son Canton. She was instrumental in getting the ER physician's CD-ROM made, so that it could be distributed to all of the emergency rooms back in the day, 2002, I think it was. So she was a very important role and helped save a lot of lives. So it was, just doing what we had to do to, find people and,
Yeah, Mom's on a Mission. I like that.
yeah.
That is really shocking to have happen a year after Dave's death, especially the same hospital.
Mm-hmm. I knew then that that I had to do what I initially set out to do, and educate the community, even the hospitals, to educate them and to send direct people to them. And that's what we did, was try to start, something like that. But then it became obvious that from phone calls I was receiving from people that, their loved one would be in the hospital and they needed access to medical journal articles that were relevant to their care so that they could give it to the physicians that were treating the patients, their loved ones. And so it was probably 1999, 2000, that I was co-founder of EDS Today, which was initially a newsletter for, by, and about people with EDS. But we published medical journal articles that were relevant to the care that most of the vascular people needed. So they would have access to those medical journals. We would get permission to print the whole entire article. So that was a blessing. Our first article was about the GI manifestations. And in that article, it told me everything I needed to know about what happened with Dave and that he should have been diagnosed based on the findings about perforation in a young person without any prior, history.
Yeah.
It should have been a giant red flag. So, but that helped to save a lot of lives. Plus, back then, the National Institute of Health, they had research studies through Dr. Naz McDonald. So she would, do a lot of research on all different types of EDS. So we advertised information about that and got the word out. So that was a big help.
How did you really start getting connected with everybody and building this network of people in 1999, 1996? I know the internet was new and it isn't as robust as it is today. I'm just amazed that you were able to do that and interested in how you did.
Well, through the national foundation and the conferences, that's how we met different people. But it was through Yahoo had a support group. It was an email support group. Sue Ginley and I think Linda Newman Potash oversaw that. So that eventually became the VEDS support group on Facebook. A lot of the people from there through Sue Ginley connected, and we shifted from Yahoo to Facebook.
Wow.
So that's how it grew, and it just, continued.
Well, you have done a really incredible job. Of all of your accomplishments over the last 20, I guess it's been 25 years now.
Yeah.
Which accomplishments or accomplishments are you most grateful for?
I think the number one is to God for restoring my faith and for keeping my family together. The second would be the 2002 emergency room physician reference CD-ROM for the vascular type, which saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. And I would say meeting everyone in the VEDS community and being blessed to know some amazing, courageous people who touched me to my core that I will never forget, and I carry them with me every single day. I think that's it.
That's it, just that small thing.
Yeah, that small thing. And and the reason for it all is because of Dave and love.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason for my journey.
What brought back your faith?
What really brought it back was people in the vascular community. A few of them said things to me that were profound. And I'm not going to share a lot of them, but it was through that experience with them.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned before this podcast that you made a pretty profound discovery after Dave's death as well, that I don't think that you've shared yet on the podcast. Do you want to share that?
I do, yes. It was probably a few days, probably a week, not even a week, after Dave's death. And I worked in the school as a child study secretary, and my sister-in-law also worked there. And so she called me to say when Dave went back to school in May, before to graduate for eighth grade, one of his school projects, his class projects, was he wrote a poem. But the way that it came about, now Dave wasn't a reader. He read stats and hockey stuff, and he really wasn't a writer. He was, a boy. He liked, hockey stats, hockey talk, everything hockey. Mm-hmm. But so if he wrote something so profound, I think he would have shared it. That was my thought. But it came about where at his funeral, I didn't want to read it until I didn't want it read until then. And my brother read the poem that was entitled Life. And it says, his name tells how it is for him. He wonders whether he should go on, but he feels so strong on reaching his goal. There are many things that happen to him, but he just pushes on. The goal is like a shining light that is blinding him. The only way of stopping the light is to reach the goal. Something happens and he thinks about stopping, but the way is now drawn for him, and he knows after getting through this has helped him see the light even brighter now. The way he feels now, he can do anything. And at that time, Dave never knew that he had vascular EDS. He never knew what they had said to us. And they had told us that he'd be very limited and not be able to do what he loved to do. And so it kind of said to me that, he heard what was said. Mm-hmm. And, there's no explanation for this poem to just suddenly popped up on a computer. It was summer, after summer. It was July, and one of the teachers went in to use the computer, and this poem popped up on the computer, had his name on it, and they printed it out, and they learned that he passed away. Wow. So they shared this poem with us.
Wow, yeah. That is so special.
Yeah, it was an amazing gift.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for reading it on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. If you had, so I know that the experience in the hospital with him in 1996 was nothing short of terrible. Yeah. Over the years, have there been any doctors or medical professionals that have shown a completely different side to you that you are grateful for? Like if you had a handful of doctors or experiences, positive experiences, which ones would you share?
Well, there were a few, but none that made an impact until 2016. When Dr. Byers introduced me to Dr. Shalhoub, a vascular surgeon that we know too well. Mm-hmm. But and they asked me to help with the VEDS collaborative and to be a stakeholder. But at the time, my heart, jumped for joy, that, wow, there's an actual vascular surgeon who is interested in vascular EDS. Mm-hmm. So when I finally met her in person and spoke with her and saw her sincere passion and dedication firsthand, she definitely restored my faith in the medical field. And to be in the room at the meeting with all of the physicians in there, speaking about vascular EDS and seeing that and witnessing that, it was an overwhelming joy that I felt like I could take a breath. I I really felt like, oh my gosh, I don't have to, be, so, um, on guard, or to make sure, that there are people in place that, I can say, oh, call this one or call that one. That was the biggest struggle, was trying to get some people help, or, even a consultation with someone who was knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, I am just so thankful for the collaborative, and the VEDS movement. That is just an amazing network. So
Thank you.
I'm thankful for the progress that has finally come about.
Yeah, it
So
really feels like I was diagnosed in 2017, and the first
yeah,
time I met you was at that VEDS collaborative meeting in 2018. Is that the one that you're
yep,
thinking of?
yes, that's the one. And
Oh, it was
I knew
amazing.
you. Yeah, I knew you from your picture. So when I saw you, I'm like, oh, Katie, right.
It was so funny. I don't think I was in the VEDS Facebook yet or
Right.
something. And
No,
so I didn't know who you were. And
yes.
I come out and I had been up for a couple hours already, just kind of waiting. And I was already on decaf coffee because that's who I am. And
Yep.
I go over there and I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody is finally awake and ready and
Yeah.
coming out, and you turn around, you're like, I know you. And
Yeah.
it was like the sweetest thing. And little did I know, like, I didn't know who I was talking to, but I love you and appreciate you so much, and I've learned so much about what you've done over the last 25 years and how important of a role you've played in really advocating. And that meeting, it really was incredible. Like, I had the same kind of feeling, and I was not nearly involved as much as you were prior to that. But it was
Yes,
such
thank
a
you.
huge weight off in
It
that meeting.
was. It was an amazing moment to be in that room all together with the same mission, and to sit across from, all these physicians that, were determined to make a difference.
Hmm.
It was a breath of fresh air.
It really
And,
was.
yeah.
And I
So,
think like a lot of what we've done since then has really been born out of the connections that were made
yes,
during that meeting.
definitely. Yes,
It's incredible.
it is. It was meant to be.
It was. It was meant to be. And then the VED study came out of that too, the natural history study.
Yes, I was just able to send all of Dave's medical records, which I have had for 25 years, and I had nowhere to send them. So to me, that is the biggest gift, that knowing that Dave and what happened and his story and his record will, contribute to the study. And, I'm just thankful that those that passed away can also be included, that their voice would still be recognized and still be included. So that's been a blessing.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. That natural history study, I think it has a couple hundred people at least enrolled now, and some of them who
Yeah.
have passed away. And I love how you phrase that as, their voices still being heard and their
Yeah.
stories being heard. That's such an important thing when you're
Yes,
looking at the
because
history.
right. And knowing, having all that documentation in one place, it's so powerful, to be able to pull something up and to learn about it. So the more that we can have people contribute to it, the bigger it will be, and the more knowledge that will be gained from it.
Hmm.
So it is a blessing.
So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to enroll yourself or a family member who has passed away from VEDS, you can absolutely do that. That's the VEDS Collaborative Natural History Study. I will put a link to that in the description of this episode as well. The last question for you. What advice do you have for those dealing with a VEDS diagnosis?
I would first say that as hard as it is to receive a diagnosis, it's so much harder, so much more devastating not knowing and taking the chance to receive inappropriate medical care. Um, I would seek out the most skilled physicians, surgeons in your area, and have them be associated with a teaching hospital. I would have a well thought out plan in place and always weigh the risks versus, the, the procedure or the, fix, the easy fix.
Mm-hmm.
The risk, you have to weigh the risk and to take precautions, to have precautions in place. And the last is to find the VEDS community either through the VEDS movement or the VEDS support group on Facebook. This is your network for support, advice, and to know you'll never walk alone in this journey. There's always someone there to hold your hand and to help you.
That is so true. And I have found the community to be so helpful. And just knowing other people who are affected by this has just been a really incredible experience. And I really thank you, Cathy, for coming on and sharing your story and Dave's story and the Bowen story and for really everything that you've done for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad I was able to tell our story.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening. This was Staying Connected. This is Katie, your host. As a reminder, this podcast will be taking a break for the summer. I will be doing podcast interviews though through the summer. So if you would like to share your story on this podcast, please reach out to me at translucent1.blog. There is a contact page on that website, and I really look forward to hearing from you. We will be back in the fall, so stay tuned, stay subscribed, and I will see you soon.